So thanks so much for coming on the show. This is great.
Yeah,
Uh,
no problem.
and thanks for sending me those notes because that's really helpful. But maybe we should just like start off with just tell us a little bit about yourself. Who you're with, and go from there.
Sounds good. Well, my name is Danielle Carnes, and I work for Edmonds College. My role with Edmonds is I'm the Vice President for Innovation and Strategic Partnerships. It's a little bit of an unusual role. I don't have a lot of counterparts across the country that have VP of Innovation on a college campus. So in terms of colleagues, I'm always excited to meet anybody else that's a futurist or looks at innovation and disruption and kind of tries to apply that to their industry. Right now, I look outside of my industry for those colleagues, but look forward to more internal as well. I've been at Edmonds College for about 5 years, and I have my master's degree is in student affairs and higher education. So this is what I went to school for, is working on a college campus and trying to help students the best I can navigate higher education and achieve their goals and leave our doors or leave our gates on the other end with what they came here to get. Yeah, so I'll start with that. And we're in just outside of Seattle, Washington.
Oh, fantastic. And how long have you been around as an institution?
The college is about 50 years old, and we started as a community college. We were, people often assume community colleges is a 2-year granting institution, but of course you have shorter and sometimes longer certificates depending on if people have to go part-time. But we just started offering bachelor's degrees 2 years ago. So we have applied bachelor's degrees, which are a little bit different than the traditional history bachelor's of history or English at a 4-year institution. So applied 4-year degrees are, they're like a 2-year technical degree plus 2 years more of advanced learning in their technical field. So they're applied degrees that are 4 years long. So we just offered those 2 years ago and changed our name to Edmonds College. And here we go. We just changed it this year. So we're off on our new adventure.
Nice. So you're saying, is it like, so it's less theoretical than you'd say at a typical college, typical university?
I'm sorry, less theoretical?
Yes, less theoretical. So it's more practical, or?
Oh yeah, yes, I would. We have both professional and technical programs, but also like transfer programs. So lots of students, traditional community colleges are sort of comprehensive in nature. Students come to you for so many different reasons. Sometimes they want to do their first 2 years of their core credits and then transfer on to university, right? That's a certain audience, a certain student type. But then other students say, you know what, I want to start with you, but I want to be out and ready to go in the workplace in 2 years. So they're looking for a more technical degree. So there's a little bit of both that are kind of thrown in the mix.
Yeah. No, my son is at Davis right now, and he did 2 years at De Anza before he went up there. Yeah. So it's very, very similar concept. But I mean, typically when you go through one of these colleges, I mean, those are the two paths you take. And what's the difference between the kind of education you get in one path and the other? Is it more GE for one, and then you do the applied stuff later, or?
Yeah, that's how I would describe it to parents and students as they're setting out to make their decisions is, what's your big goal of always starting with the end in mind? Like, where is it you want to go and end up at? And if you want to be, an anthropologist out in the field, I'm probably going to say you should probably go for a 4-year degree or higher, a master's degree, and here's your path to get there. So I think it depends on like what their end goal is. But there are, the benefits of starting with a professional technical degree is that you get hands-on in your field right away, where you might be your first quarter taking classes in electronics or engineering, robotics, quarter one. Whereas I think if you start at a 4-year college, sometimes you don't get to your major courses until you're in your junior and senior year of a traditional 4-year pathway. So there's, that 2 years of core credits and then plus your pathway credits down the road. But in a community college, you often get those pretty quickly right out of the gate.
Right. Well, that sounds like a pretty traditional path. So you're telling me you're disrupting that path, or that sounds like what you're looking to do.
Yeah.
What do you see as something? I mean, obviously, COVID and all that stuff has disrupted the in-person learning, but what kind of disruption do you see coming down the pipe that is?
Yeah,
hitting it first.
Yeah, there's been a lot of attention on higher education and how we as an industry are being disrupted. And that's right. That's not new for lots of, many industries before us have been disrupted. Many more after us will continue to be just going through their own level of disruption, which usually starts with the user experience and customers or the student needs in our case changing. And so they're telling us that they need something different by voting with their feet. So what we see right now across the country is many colleges are facing declining funding with state funds, but there's a public perception too of, is college worth it? So I think that's what's happening across the country. Families are wondering, this used to be the path. This used to be the way. After high school, you just go to college and you get your degree and then you go off into work. I think that worked for a good segment of people, but if everybody goes down that path, there's also been this fallout since then of people that are coming out of four-year programs with loads of student debt, with degrees that are hard to get jobs in. You hear the trope about the person with a four-year English degree that's working at Starbucks, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Those kinds of stories start coming up and people thinking, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe this isn't the best route to find a career for me. And so, and to boot, I'm going to come out with $60,000 in debt.
Right.
That's not appealing for a lot of families and a lot of people. And so I think that, when the public perception starts to change, they start looking for different models and different options. And that's where disruption, is born, is like, is there a different way to do this?
Right. But is this the same? It's the same. But I mean, I can understand that happening for things like, top tier schools. But I mean, your schools have always focused more on the practical anyway. So, I mean, are you still seeing that even in your space?
Well, we are poised for, yes, we are seeing it in our space, and we're paying attention to it possibly earlier than other colleges, I would say, because of our president's vision on the future and helping us all to encourage thinking about envisioning our future and then planning backwards, right? Of like, how are we going to get there and do this differently? Because there's been some, speculation that 1 out of 3, 1 out of 2, different kind of just, it is speculation. I don't, nobody knows for sure that of colleges that are going to close their doors in the next 10 years because of the academia can sometimes be the stick in the mud that wants to do it the same way we did it 200 years ago or 500 years ago. Or, and if we don't stay relevant, if we don't keep up, and if we don't shift with the student needs, then we're not going to stay relevant and they will go somewhere else. So what's happening for us in the community colleges, a lot of times students will get pulled into either for-profit institutions because they have incredible marketing budgets,
right? That
they can lure students with promises of fast track degrees, short-term programs. We can get you where you want to go quickly, faster, right? Everybody wants that. Some of those for-profits, unfortunately, aren't always very, credible and don't set students up for success and then in the long run. But some models do have staying power. So, there are several public options for, competency-based education or learning at your own speed where you're, if it's something that from your background, let's say you're a veteran and you come out of the military with 10 years of experience in something, that counts. And so, when you're able to jump ahead, it speeds your process. So we are looking at all of those avenues and saying, where can we get ahead of this and be ready for it and position ourselves so that we're not reacting and we're not just at the end of 2020s and when 2029 comes around, we're not going, oh no, the sky's falling. What do we do now? All the students are gone. Right. So I think that's our forward thinking.
Well, it seems to me that education's stuck in this monolithic tendency where you've got to go to school for a certain chunk of time, right? So you come out of high school and then you go to college for a certain amount of time. You have to be there for 2 years or 4 years or however many years. And then that's when you start working, right? After you pick that up. Is there any thoughts towards looking at a more modular approach where you say, okay, let's chunk it up. It's kind of like right now. It's like, it used to be you would be at home and that was your leisure time. Then you'd commute and then you'd be at work and then that was your work time. And now, of course, everyone's working from home, so everything blends together.
Yeah.
Have there been any thoughts to doing something like that, some kind of disruption of the monolithic educational model?
Yep, there have been. So there's definitely conversations. There was an article that I think I linked for you around the 60-year education model that Stanford is sort of looking at and kind of exploring what are some of the possibilities with that. But it's a lifelong learning model. So instead of assuming that you're going to do one career for your whole life, because nowadays most people change careers 5 to 6 times, right, in their lifetime. So the idea of going to school for one thing for 4 to 6 to 8 years, and then you don't need any more education for the rest of your life, doesn't fit the career track, right? So what if we were to change the model so that you do, just in time education blocks, just like you're suggesting, and do, 1 year here, you go into your field and you kind of, work for a while, and then you come back to us and you do your next level of training or preparation for your next phase of your career cycle, or you could switch tracks, and that way it's just much more of a modularized across your lifespan, rather than 4 years done, never go again.
Yeah. Well, because you have those, I mean, especially for something like highly technical, like a coding, right? You've got these coding boot camps that are 12 weeks. And at the end, there's a lot of applied work. I mean, obviously, it's not a full-blown software education because there's plenty of pieces missing, but it might be enough to get you into work. And the interesting thing about the coding profession is that like 75% of them are self-taught, because the industry moves so fast that what you're picking up in college is really just the foundation. I mean, what's the next language, like JavaScript, Python, blah, blah, blah. It's like you have to know whatever's hot at the moment, because if I went to college and I learned Java, I might come out a couple of years later and Python is all the rage, and I haven't picked it up personally, then I'm not there. So how does education stay in tune with sort of like the job market, which has been, it's a hard problem, right? Because you've got the time block for education, but at the same time, sort of like the jobs are a moving target.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And they'll say, that 50% of the jobs that students are going to be working at in 10 years don't exist yet. So how do you stay in front of that as a college and help educate people for jobs that you don't even know what they are, right? So, there's a few ways we do that. One is advisory boards. So we have advisory boards for all of our programs that are made up of industry members. And they advise us on our curriculum and what they need from employers and in the workforce, and what they need more of or less of. So I think that's one way we go about it. But I think another way is that the old model of education assumes that it's about content transfer. Like you said, with if I'm going to go to school and I'm going to learn Java, and then I get out and Python's the new thing, if all we did was teach you Java, you'd be out of luck. And that's what a lot of the skills-based programs are set up to do, where they're just teaching you that one thing. But if the role of a college is really to teach you the critical thinking and the problem solving and the theory underneath it, then no matter if it changes to Python or Raspberry or whatever is the next new thing, you're going to be able to go, oh, I can see the connections and the relations, and I know how to take what I learned over here, apply it over here, link the connections, and move on and move forward. Yeah. So we're teaching them how to, evergreen their skills. So it's not necessarily anymore about, if you take a history class, it's not about the timelines and the dates and the facts. It's about, how do I make room for historical perspectives on all sides of the spectrum? How do I think critically and analyze what I'm being presented with so that I can make good decisions going forward?
Yeah. And if you think about it, if you're just teaching that foundational bit, it's like learning how to learn, and then it could be a lot shorter, right? I mean, you don't necessarily need to do that in 4 years or even 2 years. It's like if you focus on that as, okay, we're prepping you, we're giving you the foundation so you can go off and learn on your own, then that's a lot less time. But does that mean if I created this magical 1-year degree where you come out and you're ready to learn, will employers look at that and go, yep, that's good, we want to hire you? Or it's like, no, that is not enough.
Yeah, that's another good questions. Because what is, when employers looking at a stack of resumes, the old model says, do they have a degree in the field that I want them to have a degree in, right? And then from what college? And you've got your Stanford, your banner behind you, which is great. Yeah. But a lot of companies right now are suggesting they've actually come out and said, like, we're not requiring degrees anymore. Just prove to us that you can do this. We'll give you a skills assessment or a live, practical test. If you can do it, then you've got the job. So that opens the door in a lot of new ways. One, it really also changes the game for education of, like, if our credential isn't needed anymore, what does that mean for us? But, two, I think there'll always be a place, because without the degree, you're right about it being self-driven. And not everybody is ready to take on that level of learning by themselves on YouTube. They could, and there are people that do it, and they can get their job at Amazon or Google or any of the tech giants. Great for them. That's wonderful. It's actually a great equity move too, to increase access without the ivory tower of needing a degree. I think it's lovely and wonderful. There's, suggestions around badges and certificates and but ultimately it will always be up to the employers to say, like, this is what makes your experience valid in my eyes. If it doesn't work for them, they're not going to go with it. A lot of companies right now are going with, they're training their own people. They're hiring people and saying, we'll put you through our own training program. That is another market signal for colleges to go, like, better pay attention. Google, Boeing, they all have their own internal training programs. That their employees go through.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you think about it, nowadays people really do learn through YouTube, right? I mean, I guess, like, a couple examples. I remember going golfing with this guy, and he was phenomenal golfer. And I said, well, you take lessons, or, how did you do this? He goes, well, I watch YouTube videos and I practice. That's all I do. And it reminds me of that joke on Big Bang Theory. I don't know if you saw that, but Sheldon taught himself how to swim by watching YouTube. And I'm like, how can you teach yourself to swim by watching YouTube?
Yeah.
So he was thoroughly convinced that he would be fine on a boat because he learned how to swim from YouTube. And it's like, really? It doesn't seem possible.
I know. Yeah, I had an experience like that. I was in Hawaii with my kids for the first time. I took my kids there, and we're on the beach, and I bought them a boogie board. They'd never seen the ocean. And so they didn't really understand the waves and the currents. And so here's my 15-year-old son on the beach, DIY Googling, how do I boogie board? And I just thought, just get in the water and feel it and try it. But for him, his answer was like, I should look this up on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think is, it seems like there's this bunch of forward-thinking employers that are into it, right? They understand that education is changing and they're not getting what they want from people who are coming out now. But then there's a huge cadre of others who are like, okay, they need this. What has to happen for them to understand that this is a new world?
For employers or students?
Yeah. Well, for both. I mean, what do we need to, what do schools need to do to prove to employers that this 1-year degree with self-teaching is just as good as a 4-year degree?
Yeah, that is hard. And if you're building your programs hand in hand with industry and business, then I think your luck or your outcomes of success are going to be better. So if you are building, we just built a 4-year bachelor's degree alongside Boeing. So if you know anything about the Northwest, Boeing is a huge mecca employer out here. And so we built that together with that program with Boeing. And so they got to have direct influence on what training goes into that and what curriculum and what they need for their future. And so I think that's probably a really good measure of success. If they don't know about it, I guess it's really trying to get them on board, get them on your campus, get them in your classrooms with your faculty to say, look what we're doing. Would this be of interest to you? So anytime we start a new program, we have to do labor analysis and figure out, is there a need for this? Is it in demand? Are there only 3 jobs posted in the past year, or are there 3,000? And what's the, so we have to use that as a guide too, to kind of have that foresight. Are we on the right track?
Right. So are you working with employers in that way, in that regard then? Are you going to employers and saying, hey, let's design a program with you so that we can create people who are perfect fits to what you need?
Yeah, we try to whenever we can. I think that, it's harder to do that with transfer programs because really where we're aligning them is their institution they're going to transfer to. So it's University of Washington or UCLA or wherever they're going. But if it's a professional field, technical field, then yeah, wherever we can, we try to work with industry and say, what's a need, what are needs, and how can we get ready for that? How can we prepare? So something, that we might be looking into in the upcoming future in our area, we've got a big light rail coming in, like a construction project. It's going to be probably a 20-year project for our area and for our county. And there's a huge need for a workforce for that. So who better to work with than your local community colleges to set up pipeline programs with the city, with the county, with your Sound Transit or your community transit partners, to develop that pipeline for when you need it. If you know it's coming, if you can read the signals and know what's coming in the future, you can try and get ahead of it and develop a program in time.
Do you think you guys in that space, sort of like not the Stanfords, but in your space, do you think you guys are actually leading the charge, bringing in new technologies and new ways or new paradigms of education?
I think we're more nimble. I think community colleges can be more nimble than a big flagship institution. I think they are so big, and some of their funding is, they've got these big research wings, which are awesome, and they bring great things to they advance health and medical and things that the community colleges don't do. But what we can do is we're a lot less bureaucratic, and we can cut through red tape much quicker and easier and say, sure, let's develop a program for this, transit product. Do we need a logistics program? Sure, we can do that in a year.
Yeah.
Whereas the bigger colleges have a harder time with that.
So you find that, have you worked in other companies, other innovation groups in other companies, or just in education?
Just in education. Yeah, my whole career has been in education. I've worked in 4-year publics, 4-year privates, and then 2-year publics where I'm at now.
And have you always been in the innovation space, or have you been?
I haven't. I actually started in enrollment management, which is sort of, it led into innovation in that, enrollment management is a lot of foresight. It's a lot of strategic foresight of trying to figure out who are your next batch of college students in tomorrow, and then who are the next ones in 10 years. What programs do you need in order to maximize your enrollment, your market position, your market share with how close the next neighboring college is to you. So all of those kinds of things led into monitoring and doing this continual environmental scan. And then I, in incoming had a new president that was really all about innovation and ideas and leaning into the future. And I think that we really work well together and just kind of hit our stride and said, let's do this all in.
Fantastic. So do you find that there's more ideas coming from the bottom up or from the top down?
They're coming from all over. We built an idea lab on our campus.
Nice.
Is a loose term. It's a group, right? It's not really a place. It's a group. But
it's a virtual place.
Yes, yeah, right. It's faculty and staff that apply to be a part of this idea lab, and that's basically what it is. It's just a think tank for the college. So we really emphasize that we want all levels of the organization, all departments, cross-functional. So you've got faculty mixed in with people that work front counters for financial aid, with people that might do the IT servers in the basement of one of the buildings, but you've got them in a room and they provide such a diverse perspective that you can get some of that bottom-up ideas. And our president has set it up uniquely in that this group is selected, it's selected by him, but it has a direct voice is to his ear, right? So they're going to go right to, that he'll hear the ideas first. But then we've actually already started implementing some of the ideas that come out of our idea labs. So it's getting a lot of traction and a lot of support and a lot of backing from our campus community.
But that's amazing, because most innovation groups are always struggling against leadership. They're like, leadership is going, oh, we need to do this. We need to increase enrollment. We need to, bring in the increase profitability, et cetera, et cetera. It's like innovation is just a distraction, but it sounds like it's more core to your mission. Especially.
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie. There is a rub, right, between innovation and your operational leadership. So your operational leadership is, I want to do the best job that I can do with what I have, with our systems in place, and don't rock the boat, and let's keep this ship going, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got the innovation person that's like, what if we blew up everything and tried this thing, right? Of course, you're going to get those leaders.
What the happy medium between those two, right?
They're just going to, they're naturally going to feel anxiety and, resistance to disrupting what is. And so there's a constant rub of the innovation side and the operational side. It's a healthy tension, but it's not easy. And it's, I think I credit some of my, change management experience. So I'm a change practitioner through ProSci, which I use sometimes, but I mix it with some other theory and methodology for my own, it's all about the people piece and trying to lead through it the best you can. Leading change, it's all about how well you do in that arena, whether or not your innovation or your change is actually going to be adopted or stick or, or get traction that you need.
Yeah. If you ask me, it's all about change management, because
totally is.
You can't it's like the technology is simple. Anything that you can do, anything that you can envision, you can probably do with technology. It's getting the people to get on board.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like what happened when they changed Windows. So remember Windows 3.1 and Windows 95, there are all these different versions of Windows. And it turned out that it cost them more to retrain than like when they replaced the interface, it cost them more to retrain people on the new interface than the actual software itself. So a lot of companies were holding back on upgrading to latest, greatest, most secure version of the software because the interface would be so different that they would have to put so much money into training that it wasn't worthwhile, which is why people go, oh, there's no innovation in these spaces anymore. Yeah, because the people can't handle the change. So if you can get people to handle the change.
100% agree. A lot of my time is spent on moving people from one place to another place before you can create sustainable change.
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about something really interesting that came out of your lab that's not going to be like totally proprietary, that you're going to tell everybody that we shouldn't be telling other colleges about because they might steal it? Anything interesting there?
I actually think that the structure itself is pretty unique for colleges to I like that we do have, it's a cohort model, and I do a little bit of teaching around futurist, mindset and theory and change management. And we do a section on industry disruption and likening it to what's happening in higher education and comparing our industry with others. So I do some instruction pieces to it. And I think that what's cool about it is that slowly over time, if I take a cohort of 20 students, 20 faculty and staff, really, employees that are going through this program every quarter, then in a 2-year period, I will have had, let's say, 200 people, 300 people over the years go through this futurist training program that not only is a byproduct of ideas, but also you're changing the culture to be more change resilience and change embracing and readiness. And I think that is a really cool byproduct because in order to accomplish the levels of change that we were just talking about, you have to have people that are ready to embrace it and move it with you. It's half the battle. It's 3/4 of the battle. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about, so the future, it's great that you call it a futurist program, because that's the name of the program that I ran at Yahoo about like a long time ago. They were doing incremental innovation and everybody was going, well, there's nothing big and disruptive here. And I said, okay, well, you know why? Because we're not looking out far enough. We have to go out 10 years and say, well, where are we going to be in 10 years? What are things going to be like? Who are our customers going to be like? And then if you just sort of reposition the time frame and say, think about things 10 years out, it completely sort of changes people's mindset and they don't think about incremental changes. So what kind of tactics did you use to try and get people to think about those further out timeframes and more disruptive things?
That's a good question, because I think, if you take the average workers or employees at a college or any place, they're going to want to fix what's around them in their everyday, right? They see things that are going wrong in the organization and they want to fix it. Which is why they self-select to apply for the lab in the first place. But we do try to set out that we're looking for ideas that are at a scale of magnitude or at a level of innovation that makes a large leap. So we differentiate it by offering examples of in our, we've given up on a traditional strategic planning model. I shouldn't say given up. We've traded it for a new model that we created ourselves called a comprehensive planning model, where we have it's a low administrative load process where we just refresh our goals each year rather than do this big overhaul 5-year strategic plan. So it's a continually refreshed plan. It's got an operational side and an innovation side. So we'll give examples of like, this is an example of what would go on the operational side. This is a great goal and strategy and action set for the operational VPs to take and move forward. This, on the other hand, is a great example of an innovation that's going to take us 2 years to get there. We've got 2 identified right now. One is our first goal is to become an entrepreneurial hub for our local community in South Snohomish County. So a convener of entrepreneurial resources for startup, prototyping, and innovation. Nice. And our second goal is, we call it Anytime, Anywhere. And that is about educational delivery models. So how can we increase access through delivery models that are available anytime, anywhere? And we actually selected these before COVID. So after everything happened, it was kind of
foresight there. There you go.
Completely catapulted probably a year faster on that goal than we would have out of necessity. So those are 2 projects, and those did both come out of our Idea Lab as like, this is what, so we combined that with trends. I have them look at trends in higher education, industry disruption, the rate of change, a little bit about the curriculum piece around futurist thinking. And then we have just a lot of discussions. So we meet every week, 2 hours a week, and I guide the discussions, and we take notes, and we do jam boards right now because we're all at home. So we do digital brainstorming and call outs, and I have assignments and homework, and like I just assigned them to watch Social Dilemma this week was their homework.
That sounds like a dream job.
It is a dream job. I have to be honest. I love my job. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. So tell me, so this entrepreneurial hub, is that what you called it?
Yep.
Is it basically like an incubator? I mean, do people apply to get into it, or how does that work?
Well, we're still developing what that looks like. We're working with our local partners. Like we have this, the city of Linwood, which is where our college is located. So city officials and our local libraries and everybody's kind of in a there's a group that we're looking for input from. I think it could be, it's going to be a collection of classes, of trainings, of workshops, but also a makerspace. So we have a makerspace already that's on our campus for tinkerers and has big tools that most people don't have in their garages, right? Like your CNC routers and your, what's that?
Do you have 3D printers?
3D printers, plasma cutters, all of it, right? We've got the whole setup.
I love it.
We have that, and our goal is to try and just, there are entities in our community that offer pieces of and services like our small business development centers and our economic alliance. And so if we can be a convener of, here's where you go, if you've got an idea, come here, and we'll be, we've got everybody's kind of at the table to help you figure out what's the next step. So we'll have some design thinking projects and classes. So those might be cohort based, they might be subscription based, they might be some certain level might be free. So it'll just depend on, and we may have some workspace, some simulation space. We're talking about possibly partnering so that our credit students, our college students can come over through the simulation labs. Like maybe it's in our business program, maybe it's in, you're going through simulation, so it's hands-on project-based learning for the credit programs as well as our community, because right now we'd like it to be an open to the whole community kind of setup. Nice.
So I'm really curious about your delivery models, because you said you're experimenting with different delivery models, and I keep thinking, when I think about different delivery models, I'm thinking about like little tiny snippets of education exactly when you need it. I mean, what kind of things are you thinking about on the delivery model?
Yeah, that's a good example. That's one of them. So our faculty are using little, like some video tools to do little snippets of just a quick learning topic that maybe is 2 or 3
like
minutes
TikTok
long.
learning or something like that.
Yeah, sure. That's a whole new wing that we're going to start, TikTok learning. No,
as long as the professor's like dancing around, then it's all good, right?
They're getting really creative about how do we teach some of the material that's hard to teach online? How do you teach music or art online when it's like it really has a tactile approach to it? And so we have faculty that are finding ways to do virtual simulations and recordings and using technology to really pull, people together in a way that they weren't ever. And I think those will probably stay. Some of those will stay after we have the option to open up our campus. Right now we don't, but eventually we will, right? To bring people back on campus. So we've also been considering doing like video enabled lectures. We're playing with synchronous and asynchronous classes. Do we meet at the same time every week online? Do we not? Is it asynchronous? Do we do Zoom lectures versus, the traditional online class? We've been teaching online for 20 years, but we don't typically do a lecture style class in an online classroom. It's only in the K-12 system right now is doing that. But so we're asking students what they want to see. Our faculty are doing, virtual business office hours. But also we are looking at the competency-based learning. We're looking at adaptive technology, which would allow you to skip ahead, digital content, apply your real life learning to that. I think that's it. Those are most, we are looking at maybe AI in a Canvas course, which is our learning management system. So maybe we have a bot that's inside your Canvas course, your online course, that helps you like know when all your deadlines are and your dates and different pieces.
Well, that actually leads me to an interesting question, because we're talking about lectures, we're talking about Zoom lectures, we're talking about webinars, we're talking about all these things where you're talking about group learning, but everybody learns at different rates. And you were talking about adaptive situations. Are we ever going to get to the point where basically everybody does an individualized set of training for them, and maybe they come together to share notes in certain situations, but like 99% of it will be individualized, adaptive to the learner themselves? How far away do you think we are from something like that?
Well, it exists already in several fields, but it's not everywhere and it's not widespread. So there are technologies that do it. They'll basically take your entire course and then modularize it so that a student can move through it at their own speed. They can back up, they can spend more time on something, they can go twice as fast as the rest of the class. So you can purchase a platform that does that and can help you put your curriculum into an adaptive format.
Oh, fantastic.
So there, ASU, Arizona State University, is using, what are they using? Cogbooks, I think is the name of the software.
Cogbooks. I've never heard of them.
Yeah. There's a lot of vendors out there for sure, but there are tools. I don't think it's right for every field. I think that, faculty are the best people to decide or to say how their content should be taught and in what way, and in group settings or individual. And there's, just like with YouTube, you can learn a lot on YouTube, but you may not want your heart surgeon learning on YouTube, right?
Well, have you ever heard of I forget the name of the company, but there's a company that does remote surgery machines, because they do like very tiny little incisions, and they have like all these different tools that can go into them. Intuitive Surgical, I think, is the name of the company. Okay. And I remember going to one of their demo rooms and seeing you had the surgeon on one side of the room and you had the machine on the other side of the room, and he was operating on a dummy through this interface. And I thought, well, what's the possibility that an AI can't watch this whole operation and try and replicate some of these things at the same time? So we might actually get to a situation where you don't need the lecturer anymore. They've totally digitized, like Jar Jar Binks in Star Wars or something like that, and then they can come in and they can do and they'll just do it at any time and place, whenever it needs to be done.
Yeah, so maybe that may be the way of it. I think that automation is the next new thing, right? Like we're, even thinking about teaching in automation, of teaching, for instance, like surgical robotics. And I think that down the road, even in like aerospace, we have a lot of aerospace out here is automated. And so all of those robotics and machines, people fear those as a replacement for workforce. Will it someday replace our workers? And I'm not of that mind. I don't think it will. I think it actually will just help us to go to the next level and use our human intelligence in ways that AI can't. But I always think that automation it always has to have a human handler, for the ethical sides, for professional judgment, for, all of those pieces. But so I think there will be still a place for faculty and professors and learning, and even if it's assisted through technology, there's something about having somebody to talk to, a teacher, somebody who cares about you and knows who you are. And
and it's interesting because I think what's going to happen there is that we're going to see this. I think a lot of people are worried that they're going to lose their jobs to automation, right? But if you lose your job to automation, that's actually not a bad thing, because it means that particular role is so compartmentalized that some automated process can do it. So that means it's actually probably not a good enough job for a human being to do, because human beings have so much capacity. It's like you're doing this little job. For example, Uber driving, right? So a driver, if there are autonomous vehicles that can actually drive as well as or better than human beings, then wouldn't it be better to take that big brain that's sitting behind the steering wheel and have them do something that's more suited to a big brain and not, driving a car around? So exactly. It's like I'd love to see that, where people become more human. They get away from those cog jobs, which is funny to mention, because they get away from the cog jobs and they become more human jobs. And that leads me to my next question, is on the humanities. Are you seeing that there's going to be more emphasis on that as opposed to the technology jobs? Is it because of AI, or are there other reasons why we may be moving in that direction?
I think a lot of people would speculate that humanities is not as important as, like, say, the deficits or the really drastic need in STEM fields. Like, people will talk at length, especially in the Seattle area, about the number of STEM jobs that are going unfilled every year.
Well, you guys are in a very technology.
We are. We're in a very technology.
Silicon Valley. We're the same.
Yes. However, I am a believer in our humanities as well, and I think that you can train skills in tech skills as much as you want, but without that critical thinking, I think that comes through our humanities, and it comes through our the level of analysis that we're looking for in our next generation of leaders and our next generation of geniuses and problem solvers. They've got to have some of those deeper skills than just how to create and program a drone or whatever they're working on. So I think we're going to come full circle with it. I know that right now it sometimes gets a bad rap in media as, like, we need to focus fully on STEM and STEM only, but I think that we're gonna return to it, especially after watching The Social Dilemma. You start thinking about, like, the ethics side of any innovation. I even was considering whether I should have an ethics board or an ethics advisor for my Idea Lab, just to make sure that we're really thinking about the ethical implications down the road for any innovations we're suggesting.
Yeah. You know what you need is a chief philosopher. I think everybody needs a chief philosopher.
That's a great job title.
In fact, if you think about it, I think every leadership team should include a chief philosopher, which includes ethics and epistemology and everything around the philosophy degree, because we've been stepping away from it for so long, and I think that's might be part of the problem with all of our ethical dilemmas right now, is that we're not actually thinking about that side of it. We're just thinking about the profit motive. We're thinking about other things, and we're stepping away from the ethics and other things in that space. So one of the things you mentioned earlier I thought was interesting. You said something about looking very far forwards and then working backwards, because I'm a huge believer in taking the maze backwards, because it's much easier that way, right? So how do you work that? Is that like an exercise you do, or is it something?
Yeah, it's kind of like what we do, with students versus like what I would do in the Idea Lab, is to say, envision the future that you want. And our president often will say this, is think about the future that you want your students to experience in this department or in this office or at this college, depending on the scope of your project. And then think about that really without borders, without boundaries and limitations on budget, and like, what would it be like? And then once you really can describe that, what you wish it could be, and that end state and that future state, then you start working backward and say, okay, what would it take to get there? How long would it take to get there? And what are the changes needed to start plotting our way to make it happen? And it's better to do that without borders than it is to try and do, I prefer that than incremental improvements on what you have now.
Yeah.
That's just going to get you, maybe more efficient now or with what you have, but not a leap in a new direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's actually something my company does. We have this thing called a 10-year backcast where we basically say, okay, tell me what you want. Envision the world in 2030, right? Envision where your customers are going to be, where the world's going to be, where your industry is going to be, everything, right? Imagine that. And then once we have that nailed down, they go, okay, let's work backwards. Let's go back. If that's the world that's going to be here in 2030, then where do we need to be in 2027, in 2025, in 2022, in 2020, so that we can get to that point? So it sounds very similar to what you were talking about.
I do think it's important, though, to root it in a realistic foresight too, because sometimes you'll take a group of people and say, where do you want to be in 2030? What's the future? And you'll get people going into real sci-fi realms, right? Of like, we should have flying cars and and it's like, oh, that's great. But, you have to sort of take into account all of the different market signals you're seeing and what's the trend and what direction and so there's an article that I have them read that, talks about the difference between waves and currents. So like, is this trend, is it just a wave that's going to go and go away? Or is it a current that's like moving an entire movement forward? So how do you tell the difference?
Excellent. Excellent. I love the sound of that. So speaking of 2030, where do you think things are going to be in 2030? Where do you think your industry is going to be in 2030?
Let's see. So that is 10 years from now.
10 years from now, what will education be like?
I think that there's going to be a mix. I do think we're going to see a lot of colleges that will close or merge. I think we'll see a lot of mergers. I hope that we will see mergers of 2 years and 4 years together institutions, so that it's all one shop. You've got your 2-year programs and your 4-year programs, and it goes seamlessly together. I think we'll see modular. I think we will have to respond to the need to get people in and out and off to their goal quicker than we do now. Because I also think that that's what students are looking for is, I'm coming to you, college, because I want to get to point A or point Z, and I'm at point A, and I want to get there as quick as I can. I don't have time to swirl and go like through the alphabet and back again. And so that's a shift in consumer culture. So we've got to figure out, and there's a academic reform called Pathways. And it's kind of like putting bumper rails on a student's experience so that they stay on their path, get all the way to the finish line and successfully out the door.
Right.
I would love to see more educational programs tied to industry where they would come right out into an entry-level job. Like as a part of their education is that they have a placement in somewhere, kind of like an apprenticeship. I was actually in the Idea Lab this week, and they were saying, isn't it funny how the 16th century model of apprenticeships is back? And
I totally believe in that model. I think we should absolutely hit that hard because it works, right? Because I mean, nine times out of 10, what you want is that on-the-job training with an expert in the field, because they know things that you're not going to get in education. And plus, it's like we were talking about before, you're getting the latest and greatest knowledge of what's happening today, as opposed to, what the educational system thinks you need to know, you're getting today. So I think, apprenticeship programs, everything old is new again, and it worked. That's why they did it, because it worked, not just because they didn't have access to education.
Yeah, I'd say yes, and because I don't know that it works for what's tomorrow. It's happening. It's what's happening today, but how do you apprentice for something that's not here yet?
Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, there's this famous futurist, Thomas Fry, who says, we're going to lose 2 million jobs. And it's like, yeah, but we're probably going to gain 4, but we just don't know what those are, like you were saying earlier. Fantastic. Man, well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been great. Any final words or final thoughts on where things are going in your space?
Well, I just thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on. I know that you don't have a lot of higher ed listeners maybe, but I hope it's been insightful and it fits in with all the other disruption that's happening everywhere all around us. And none of us are isolated in that. It's all connected. So the disruption that's happening in healthcare, that's happening in information management, like just how we get information and communicate information across the world, all of that is being disrupted, and it all impacts education in college. And so we're just part of that bigger ecosystem. So I appreciate being at the table and part of the conversation. And I look forward to watching some of your future casts. And
well, yeah, we should probably do this again, because education is one of those things that's close to my heart, and I know there's disruption will definitely help it. The question is, what kind of disruption does it need, and what's the best way to get it happening? And so, yeah, I'd love to talk more about that, in
that's
future.
Great. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This has been great.
You're welcome. Yeah, nice to meet
Talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.